Life has a certain sound when someone is in a hurry, even if they never speak it aloud. It isn't footsteps or alarms or a rushing breath. It's subtler than that. A quiet tightening somewhere behind the ribs. A faint but persistent hum that whispers, "You should be further along by now." Most people don't notice it, because it's been with them for so long. It's the familiar pressure they wake up with, the same pressure they carry into the shower, into their commute, into the tiny gaps between thoughts. It's the soft panic of believing life is a race, even when no one remembers announcing the starting gun. And yet, there you are, running. The world around you moves with practiced indifference. The traffic lights change on schedule. Clouds drift across the sky without hurrying. Even the dust in a sunbeam drifts at its own unbothered pace. But your chest tightens when you check the time, when someone else seems ahead, when plans fall behind schedule. It's strange, isn't it, how a person can feel late for a life that no one else is measuring, but many do. And often the only scoreboard is the one their own mind invented. Sit with that for a moment. The exhaustion, the quiet shame, the sense of falling behind some invisible timeline. These things aren't flaws, they're symptoms. Signs of a story you inherited long before you knew you were in it. A story that says your worth is tied to your pace, and that slowing down is dangerous. That if you stop running, something terrible will catch up to you. But what? No one can quite say. Maybe the problem isn't your speed. Maybe it's the belief that there is somewhere you're supposed to arrive before time runs out. People rarely question that belief because it feels so absolute, like gravity or aging. But what if it isn't? What if the finish line you've been racing toward doesn't exist? Not really. And the panic of falling behind is just a shadow of that illusion. Consider this quietly. If life is not a race, then why are you running? And if there is no finish line at all, what happens to all the pressure you've been carrying? That question lingers intentionally, like a door half open, waiting for you to look through. Long before you chose your goals or shaped your ambitions, the world had already begun shaping your pace. The first race you ever ran was not your idea. It began in the soft, innocent places. Living rooms where adults compared you to children who walked sooner, spoke earlier, slept better. It continued in classrooms where grades were arranged in neat columns, where gold stars and red marks drew invisible hierarchies, where your value seemed to rise or fall with each test. You didn't know it then, but these were your first laps. Children don't naturally compare themselves. They learn it the way they learn language, by listening, a raised eyebrow, a disappointed sigh, a congratulatory tone used for someone else's achievement. These things teach faster than any teacher, and slowly, without meaning to, you absorbed a quiet rule. Life is measured. Ranking isn't an event, it's an atmosphere. And the only safe place is ahead. Pause for a breath. Think of how early that seed was planted and how deeply it grew. You weren't chasing success at 5 years old. You were chasing approval, safety, belonging. By the time adulthood arrived, the race was already in full motion, and you didn't question whether it made sense. You simply kept running, because stopping felt like the one thing you were never allowed to do. Over time, something subtle happened. The comparisons that once came from parents and teachers began coming from inside your own head. You didn't need anyone else to tell you who was ahead. You could tell yourself. Every scroll through social media became a scoreboard. Every milestone reached by someone else became a reminder of where you should be. The race had moved inside you, and once it lives there, it becomes harder to see it for what it is, a story inherited, not chosen. Here's the pivot you rarely hear spoken. Ambition was not born in you fully formed. Much of it was implanted, gently, consistently, by a world that believes progress must always accelerate. A productivity culture dressed as common sense. A hidden scoreboard everyone denies believing in but quietly obeys. And so the question forms, soft but unignorable. What happens when conditioning becomes identity? When will the pace you learn become the pace you live? That question doesn't demand an answer, not yet. It simply opens the next doorway. There are people who live life at such a pace that even the morning light struggles to keep up with them. Maya is one of those people. Her days begin before the sun rises, not because her soul calls her to greet the dawn, but because a quieter, sharper voice inside her insists she must stay ahead. She wakes in a high-rise above the Chicago River, where the water moves with an ease she secretly envies. The city outside her window has no interest in competing, and yet she races against it anyway. Her routine is a choreography of tension. Coffee drips as her laptop boots up, emails loading as she brushes her teeth, Slack notifications buzzing as she ties her shoes. On the train to work, she scrolls through the curated victories of other people's lives, engagements, promotions, new homes drenched in warm filter tones. She tells herself she isn't comparing, but comparison is built into the very motion of her thumb. Beneath each flick of the finger lies the whisper she cannot silence. Why am I not there yet? By evening, the city lights shimmer like a field of small ambitions burning in the distance. She leaves the office long after most have gone, muscles tight, eyes glazed, heart pacing to a rhythm it never agreed to. She's used to this. The tired triumph of surviving another day that asked too much. But one night, as she steps off the train and begins her familiar walk home, something strange happens. She arrives at her door with her keys in hand, and no memory of the journey that brought her there. Not the sidewalk, not the crosswalk lights, not the strangers brushing past her. The world she moved through left no imprint on her mind. She stands there, stunned, as if waking from a dream she didn't know she was having. Her breath catches in her throat. A quiet fear blooms. If I can't remember my days, am I living them? It is not panic that rises, but recognition, the kind that stings because it feels like truth. Her emptiness is not a failure of effort. It is the byproduct of a life lived too fast, too efficient, too measured. A slideshow she watches without ever stepping into the frame. And as she unlocks her door, she senses something she hasn't allowed herself to feel in years, a question forming, delicate but insistent. What would slowing down even look like for someone who's forgotten how? That question doesn't answer itself. It simply follows her inside, lingering like a shadow with its hand gently on her shoulder. Speed is a seductive lie. It tells you that the faster you move, the more life you'll gather. It promises efficiency, achievement, a sense of momentum that feels like meaning. But speed is clever. It hides its cost until you're deep inside its logic. That's when the paradox reveals itself. The faster you go, the less of your life you actually touch. People rarely question the pace they're keeping. They just wake up one day with the uneasy suspicion that they're behind. Behind what, though? Some imaginary timeline? A version of themselves they were supposed to have become by now? Someone else's highlight reel, masquerading as universal truth? The feeling persists. I should be further along. It echoes through commutes, inboxes, late-night thoughts. It feels personal, but it is not. It is structural, cultural, a collective hallucination that progress is a straight line and acceleration is the only responsible response. If you look closely, you can see the illusion breaking down. The goal you chase keeps moving just out of reach, like the horizon playing a quiet joke on anyone who tries to catch it. The satisfaction you expect from arriving dissolves into the next objective before you can savor it. Your life becomes a wheel of small dissatisfactions, spinning too quickly to notice individually. You're not failing. You're simply running at a pace that makes depth impossible. Imagine sitting at a table with your favorite meal, but swallowing each bite without tasting it. That is what speed does to a life. You accumulate experiences, but you don't absorb them. You arrive at milestones, but they blur together. And afterward, when you try to remember the days, weeks, years, you get fragments, impressions, flashes of moments that should have been whole. The mind can't hold what the body rushes through. There's a humor to it, in a bittersweet way. The more you strain to catch up, the more distant fulfillment becomes. Achievement piles up like souvenirs from trips you barely recall. And the emptiness that follows isn't a sign that you're moving too slowly. It's a sign you're moving too quickly to inhabit your own life. So pause and ask quietly, without judgment, what would you notice if you weren't in such a hurry? The question doesn't accuse, it invites. It gently cracks open a door to a different kind of living, one that isn't measured by how far you go, but by how deeply you are here. That crack in the door, that soft invitation, is enough. It leads naturally to the next revelation, waiting patiently just beyond the threshold. There comes a moment in every life, often quietly, often without ceremony, when a person senses that something about the way they've been moving no longer makes sense. It doesn't arrive with a sudden crash or grand revelation. It comes softly, the way dawn creeps in before you're fully awake. A subtle awareness that the race you've been running might not be real. It's disorienting at first, like discovering that a road you've traveled for years leads nowhere in particular, and yet you've been sprinting down it as if a medal waited at the end. People resist this realization. The mind tightens its grip on old beliefs because illusion can be comforting when it's familiar. The idea of a finish line, even an invisible, undefined one, creates the illusion of direction. It gives you something to chase, something to measure yourself against, something that feels like purpose. And so, when the thought emerges that there might not be a finish line at all, the heart pushes back. If the race isn't real, it wonders fearfully, then what have I been doing all this time? And that question sounds like a threat, but it isn't. It's an invitation. Taking a closer look reveals the truth slowly. The race isn't built into the world. It's built into the mind. It's not woven into nature. Trees don't rush. Oceans don't compete. The moon does not measure its pace. The race is a construct, a story inherited, a lens through which you've been taught to view your life. It feels real because you've repeated it so long that the mind no longer distinguishes between belief and truth. But when you step back from the noise, just slightly, you begin to see its edges. The deadlines, the comparisons, the fear of falling behind. None of them are inherent to living. They're habits of thought, patterns etched into memory, echoes of a world that values speed more than presence. There's a quiet humor in the discovery. All that effort, all that urgency, all that breathless rushing, and the finish line turns out to be imaginary. Yet this is not a loss. It's a release. Because if the race was never real, then neither was the fear of losing it. And what remains beneath the illusion is something far steadier, far kinder. The possibility of moving through life not with pressure, but with awareness. The question then becomes less threatening, more curious. If the race exists only in your thoughts, what happens when you stop running? That question hangs lightly in the air, pointing toward a stillness, waiting just beyond the next breath. There is a particular kind of silence that appears only when a person finally stops moving. Not the silence of an empty room, but the silence inside the body. The one that rises after months or years of being drowned out by motion. It doesn't arrive politely. Stillness has a way of revealing everything you've been avoiding. The emotions you tucked into the corners of your days. The questions you dismissed with busyness. The small aches you said you'd deal with later. When the mind stops sprinting, all of it comes forward, gentle but undeniable. This is why people fear slowing down. It isn't laziness they dread. It's the intimacy of meeting themselves without distraction. Stillness demands honesty, and honesty can feel like standing in a bright, quiet room without armor. But this same vulnerability is what makes stillness transformative. For the first time in a long time, you can actually hear yourself. Not the frantic part, not the competitive part, not the anxious part, but the part of you that has been waiting patiently beneath the noise, the part that speaks in soft truths instead of urgent demands. If you feel something shifting in you right now, a pause you didn't expect, a breath that feels deeper than usual, mark it. Let it matter. And if this moment has made you stop, even briefly, allow yourself to acknowledge it. In fact, you might even like this video simply as a way of saying to yourself, I'm choosing to slow down here. Not for the algorithm, not for me, for you. Sometimes a simple gesture can anchor an intention long enough for it to take root. Stillness is not the absence of life. It is the doorway to it. When you stop rushing, the world doesn't fall apart. It comes into focus. You hear sounds you forgot to notice. The hum of appliances, the distant chatter outside, the soft rhythm of your own breathing. You notice the textures of your own thoughts, the gentle settling of emotions that have been waiting to be felt. It's here, in this unhurried quiet, that clarity begins to form. Not all at once, not in some sudden revelation, but slowly, like a lens coming into focus after being smudged for too long. And so another question rises. Not urgent, not demanding, just present. What clarity have you been outrunning? That question drifts forward with a kind of tenderness, lighting the way into the next moment, the next breath, the next truth. There are some awakenings that don't feel like light entering a room. They feel like dimming, a quiet realization that what once seemed bright and promising has faded into something hollow. That was Daniel's awakening. Not explosive, not dramatic. Just a steady recognition, like noticing the sound of a clock you've lived with for years, ticking louder than you remembered. Daniel's life on paper was exactly what ambition promises. A senior software lead in Seattle, office overlooking Lake Union, a view people would envy. His resume read like a steady climb upward. His salary matched his sacrifices. His boss admired him. His colleagues relied on him. And yet, when he sat alone late at night in that office, screens glowing like artificial stars, he felt less like a man succeeding and more like a man being swallowed by his own momentum. The marriage he once nurtured grew thin around the edges. Conversations with friends became obligations. His guitar gathered dust, strings loosening with time. Even his sleep began to feel optional. He would wake at 3 a.m., mind buzzing with tasks lined up like soldiers waiting for orders. People praised his work ethic, unaware that each compliment was another stone added to the load he carried. Then came the email, the one that was supposed to crown everything, a major promotion, more responsibility, more authority, more speed. His phone buzzed with congratulations, emojis, exclamation marks, all the symbols of modern approval. But something unexpected happened. Instead of feeling victorious, he felt a strange, heavy ache in his chest. Not fear, not joy. Something more like mourning. He didn't understand it at first. He only knew that his hands trembled slightly as he held the phone. He sat at the kitchen table long after midnight, the glow of the screen lighting the unanswered question in his mind. If this is winning, why does it feel like losing myself? It was the first honest thought he'd had in years, and in that unguarded moment, he did something astonishingly simple. He said no. No to the title. No to the faster pace. No to the version of himself built from deadlines and expectations. What followed wasn't dramatic. It was human. He took a slightly smaller role. He left work on time. He walked home slowly, watching ferries glide across the lake with a grace he couldn't remember feeling. He cooked dinner, not reheated, not rushed. He picked up his guitar, fingers clumsy but alive. His wife smiled differently. His breath landed deeper. His nights grew quiet. A year later, Daniel's title was smaller. His life was bigger. And for the first time in decades, he felt something unfamiliar and almost sacred. Enough. What would stepping into your own life look like? The question doesn't press, it simply lingers, offering space to imagine the possibility. In the quiet places of the world, the places untouched by deadlines and urgency, growth looks nothing like the race people run. Consider a forest at dawn. No tree checks its height against another. No pine leans over to calculate whether it's falling behind. Each trunk grows at its own deliberate pace, guided by sunlight, water, and the quiet intelligence of its own roots. Nature has no scoreboard. Only humans try to force one onto their lives. If you've ever stood in such a forest, even for a moment, you felt it. That sense of belonging without pressure. The soft assurance that nothing in nature hurries, yet everything arrives. If you allow yourself, even briefly, to imagine your own life the way a tree experiences its existence, patiently, organically, without comparison, you might feel a kind of relief you haven't known in years, a release of the need to chase someone else's timeline, a loosening of the tight grip you've had on your own progress. People rarely give themselves permission to grow slowly. They worry what others will think or how they'll be judged. They fear being misunderstood, labeled as unambitious, or mistaken for someone who has given up. But sometimes slowing down is not withdrawal. It's wisdom. It's choosing depth over speed, roots over reach, presence over panic. And if in this moment you feel a small shift inside you, a sense that you'd like more reminders to live at your own pace, then let this be simple. Go ahead and subscribe to this channel, not as a transaction, but as a quiet act of self-care. A way of telling yourself, I want to remember this feeling. I want to return to this kind of gentler truth. One reminder a week won't fix everything, but it might keep you from forgetting who you are beneath the noise. Imagine now that you are standing in that forest, light filtering through the canopy, soil beneath your feet. The air hummed with presence, no urgency, no stopwatch measuring your worth, just rhythm, breath. Being in such a place, the question that haunted you begins to dissolve. Why am I so late? And another truth rises softly in its place. You cannot be late for your own life, not when you and your path unfold together. each at the only pace they've ever needed. There is a particular kind of bravery that rarely earns applause. It doesn't look like achievement or triumph or ambition fulfilled. It looks quieter, almost invisible to the untrained eye. It's the courage to stop moving in a world that worships speed. The courage to step out of a race that everyone else still insists is real. The courage to pause long enough to ask a question that could unravel your entire way of living. What if slowing down is not losing, but finally choosing yourself? Many people don't realize how much strength it takes to resist the momentum of a life built on acceleration. It means standing still while others seem to sprint ahead. It means enduring the discomfort of watching someone else hit milestones you once wanted. It means letting go of the illusion that faster automatically means better. And even more frightening, it means facing the parts of yourself that motion protected you from. The fear of not being enough, the worry that you'll vanish if you stop producing. The quiet ache you've carried for years but never named. But something remarkable happens the moment you dare to slow your pace. Reality softens its edges. The noise you thought was coming from the world reveals itself as the echo of your own rushing mind. The pressure you believed was external begins to crumble when you realize no one is actually keeping score. And the breath you didn't know you'd been holding finally releases, leaving space for something tender to rise. If you felt this shift, even faintly, even for a moment, there's someone else in your life who needs it too. Someone running themselves thin. Someone drowning quietly under expectations. Someone who hasn't paused long enough to hear themselves think. If they come to mind just now, trust that instinct. Go ahead and share this video with them. Not as advice, not as a correction, but as a small act of kindness. One that says, you don't have to run alone. You don't have to run at all. Slowing down isn't a weakness. It isn't a failure. It's a rebellion against a story that was never meant to define you. It's the first step toward a deeper kind of strength. The kind that isn't measured by pace, but by presence. And that presence opens a new question, one that sits quietly at the edge of awareness. What truth might finally surface when you stop running long enough to hear it? There is an old belief many people carry, often unconsciously, often inherited. The idea that worth must be earned, that it rises with productivity, expands with achievement, and shrinks whenever you slow down. It's a belief reinforced by report cards, job titles, performance reviews, and the subtle comparisons that weave through daily life. But worth, real worth, is older than all of that. It existed before your goals, before your ambition, before the pressure to prove anything at all. It was never something you had to chase. And yet chasing is what so many of us do. We chase approval, hoping it will confirm our place in the world. We chase accomplishments, hoping they'll quiet the voice inside that calls us behind. We chase perfection, believing it will make us untouchable. But no amount of speed can outrun the truth. You were never supposed to earn the right to be enough. You were simply supposed to remember it. This remembering comes slowly. It begins when you start questioning the assumptions you've lived with. Why do I tie my value to how much I get done? Why do I believe rest must be justified? Why do I think falling behind means failing at life? These aren't questions meant to unsettle you. They're meant to free you. They peel back the layers of cultural conditioning that taught you to measure yourself by a yardstick that was never yours in the first place. If you feel something loosening inside you as you hear this, don't ignore it. It's the first sign that the old story is beginning to crack. And in that small fracture, a new truth enters. Your pace does not determine your worth. Your productivity does not determine your belonging. Your achievements do not determine your right to breathe slowly and fully. Sometimes saying the truth aloud or writing it is what makes it real. So take a moment if you're willing and leave a comment below. Tell me, what are you ready to stop running from? Your words might be the reflection someone else needed. They might even be the permission you've been waiting to give yourself. And as that truth settles, a new feeling begins to rise. Soft, steady, undeniable. What if this moment, exactly as it is already enough? Growth does not move in straight lines, no matter how many charts or timelines or 5-year plans try to convince you otherwise. It moves more like a spiral, slowly circling outward, returning to places you thought you'd already passed, revealing new depths in familiar terrain. People mistake this for regression, feeling embarrassed when old fears resurface or old patterns reappear. But this revisiting isn't a failure. It's how life teaches. Each return is a chance to see the same truth with a little more clarity, a little more courage, a little more capacity to hold what once overwhelmed you. Think back to moments you thought you'd outgrown, insecurities you believed were gone, anxieties you thought you resolved. They visit again not to punish you, but because you're finally strong enough to meet them without running. The spiral brings them back into view at angles that reveal something you couldn't see before. That's how depth works. That's how understanding matures. And nothing about that movement is linear. People forget this and judge themselves unfairly. They think, I should be over this by now. But the truth is gentler. You're not looping back to the beginning. You're rising, layer by layer. Even if it feels subtle, even if it feels painfully slow, even if the progress is visible, only when looking back with softened eyes. The spiral widens quietly, the way rings on a tree widen year after year, without ever announcing themselves. If somewhere inside you feel that tug, the old urge to speed up again, to fix everything at once, to outrun the parts of you you're tired of meeting, pause here. Let this be a place you can return to. In fact, when that familiar restlessness starts to rise again, when you feel yourself slipping back into the rhythm of the race, let this be simple. Rewatch this video, not as a ritual, not as homework, but as a way of stepping gently back into yourself. Each viewing meets you differently because each version of you sees something new. The spiral isn't asking you to race upward. It's inviting you to recognize that growth is happening, even when it's quiet, even when it's slow, even when it looks like you're circling the same territory. And as the circle widens, another question forms. Soft, patient, unhurried. Where might this spiral lead if you stop pushing and simply allow yourself to rise? There is a particular freedom that arrives only when a person finally sees through the illusion that shaped their life. It doesn't come with trumpets or epiphanies or dramatic collapse. It comes like exhaling after years of holding your breath without realizing it. A quiet recognition that the pressure you carried for so long was never truly yours, that you cannot be late to a life that unfolds only in the present moment, that the finish line you feared missing never existed anywhere outside your imagination. Most people spend their lives in pursuit of some distant there, a version of themselves they believe will finally be worthy, finally be enough, finally be allowed to rest. But each time there is reached, it moves like a mirage receding one step further into the horizon. And so they run, they push, they measure, they tighten, they forget to breathe. Yet all along, the thing they were chasing was already available here, in the simplicity of being alive without conditions. When you stop running, something beautiful happens. Not all at once, but gradually, like a dawn unfolding across the sky. You begin to notice the texture of things, the warmth of your morning cup, the weight of your own hands, the sound of your feet on the floor. You notice how sunlight pools differently on different days, how laughter shakes loose from you when you're not rushing, how conversations deepen when you stop trying to get somewhere else. The world hasn't changed. You have. You're finally moving at the speed of your own life. This realization doesn't erase difficulty. Life will still bring challenges, losses, unexpected turns. But without the race, they no longer feel like verdicts on your worth. They become experiences, raw, real, part of your unfolding rather than proof of falling behind. And in this gentler space, something undeniable rises. The understanding that you were never meant to sprint through your existence. You were meant to live it, moment by moment, breath by breath, with the steady trust of someone who knows they belong exactly where they are. So now, as the pace softens and the noise fades, a final question lingers, not demanding an answer, only inviting one. Now that you've stopped running, what do you finally see? Finally,